Let's analyze what happens with the categories, with the countries, and with the cities. The categories, as well as the countries and the cities, are concepts which correspond to independent entities of the tourist attractions, and so they should be defined as transactions in and of themselves. So let's concentrate on countries. Each country has a set of cities, and each city belongs to a single country. GeneXus has a very simple way of representing this reality, and it's by using a two-level transaction. So now we'll create the transaction countries, and we'll represent this relationship in which one country can contain many cities and one city belongs to a single country. And we'll do this by using a two-level transaction. In order to do this, we're going to go to Transactions, the Transactions folder within the KB Navigator. I right-click New Object, and once again we create a transaction object which we'll call Country. So we define the attributes which will make up this transaction. Country ID automatically shows up when I start typing it because it is already defined in the knowledge base. It was defined when we created the attraction transaction. So I add country name, and we're also going to define the attribute country flag, which will contain the flag of each country. We're going to define it as blob data type, which will allow us to store images. So up until now, we have defined the first level, the header of the transaction, country. We now need to define the second level, which will allow us to store the cities. And so in this way, it'll represent that each country contains many cities and one city belongs to a single country. How do we go about adding the second level? Well, we position the cursor on the last attribute and right-click and select the option Insert Level. This way, we are adding a second level to the transaction that we are defining. This second level will be made up of the attributes City ID, City Name, and also City Information, which is a new attribute and will be of varchar 200 data type. We save our changes, and now if we look at the web form it infers, we see how the second level is represented. Here we have the country name with its identifier, the flag, and this second level that corresponds to the cities. Based on this structure, GeneXus determines that it needs to create two tables. One table which corresponds to the header, to the country, whose primary key is country ID, and a second table which corresponds to the second level, whose primary key is the combination of country ID and city ID. The definition of this transaction also produced some important changes. In particular, the structure of the table attraction has been modified because GeneXus has normalized it and found new functional dependencies. Let's take a look at what this table looks like now. In order to do this, we go over to the tables and we'll open the table attraction. We can clearly see that the attributes country name and city name do not belong to the structure anymore. Why did this happen? When we defined the transaction country, we defined the attribute country ID as the identifying attribute. Because of this, the attribute country name is now determined based on the attribute country ID. As a result, GeneXus will create a table whose physical composition we can see here. It has It has the attributes country ID, country name, and country flag. And what happens to the cities? Well, each city will be identified for a specific country by the city ID, and so based on the combination country ID and city ID, the attributes city name and city information will be determined. As a result, GeneXus creates a physical table representing this dependency. We can see this here in this table, country city. This appeared based on the definition of the transaction country. Here we can clearly see that the table is physically made up of these four attributes, and the attributes country ID and city ID form the primary key. With this primary key combination, we will obtain the name of the city and its information. So now let's return to our transaction attraction. We can see that the attributes country name and city name are still present here, even though we know that these attributes do not belong to the physical table attraction. These attributes will now be inferred based on the corresponding foreign keys. Based on the country identifier, which the user enters, GeneXus will infer the country name, and when the city identifier is entered, GeneXus will infer what the name of the city is. With this, we conclude that for these inferred attributes to be visible in a transaction's web form, they have to be present within its structure.